So if you have updated, then you notice that the Volume Analyst and the Divergences Pro will have been dropped from your old charts and workspaces. And none of those old templates, chart templates, will work. And that is because the Volume Analyst properties have been completely restructured, which I won't go into right now. But so has, well, the Divergences Pro has been just completely rebuilt from the ground up. And it's pretty elaborate what we've done here. And all this is getting moved over to NT8 exactly as is. The swing algorithm, that is the backbone of this, and the main parameters for that swing, the swing settings, is right here. So you'll see everything is divided up into nice and neat headings here. Starting with options and parameters, license key, divergence component, that's whether you're using an oscillator or an indicator, and which one, and then the price component. This was the big added functionality here for the swing algorithm. So previously, and this is a new option here, the weighted price. So the weighted price is the high plus low plus close plus open divided by 4. And since the oscillator only has one input, we wanted to match that exact input for the swings. Otherwise, we were using the high and low to mark the swing highs and lows, whereas the oscillator was using the closing price before. So they weren't, it wasn't totally true. We weren't comparing apples to apples. We were comparing apples to oranges. And it's much more accurate this way to compare, obviously, to compare the swings from the weighted price to the input of the oscillator, which is the weighted price. So this gives us a bit more control over the signals, and it's much, it's a truer representation of actual waning momentum divergence patterns. All right, so before you could set it to close, median, typical, and then you could set the input of the actual indicator, the divergence component here, to typical, median, or close, but that was always calculated on bar close. And let me turn everything on so you know what I'm talking about. Oh, before I do that, you see how it says limited view here? So what happens is when you load the chart and you tap F5 to reload it, it's only going to calculate the visible portion of the chart plus about 500, 600 bars to the left of that. And that's just to cut down on load time. But it also cuts down a little bit on run time when you have all the swings on, because when all the swings are on, it's looking back to every single swing that's on the chart and comparing whether we've broken that swing or if we're touching it or whatnot. There are a lot of new data series in this, which gives us full control over what I'm trying to do inside of Bloodhound as far as automated signals and trailing stops and all sorts of stuff. So it's best to leave that on, limited view, which is here, right here, but on some of the faster charts like the row 1, row 2, the entry chart, I may have it turned off so that we can actually use those swings inside of Bloodhound. All right, but for most of the charts, this is set to true, so it'll load a little bit faster. Now, back to the swings, so you can control all of the visuals from this pop out right here. You first have to have the chart selected, and then you can right click on that button at the top on the tool strip, and this pops out the visual properties for the price panel, not for the indicator panel, just for the price panel. And these are the swings: major, intermediate, minor. This is the trend info box down here at the bottom, right there. And you can see when you tighten the bars up, when you zoom out, add more bars to the chart, you can hide everything. That's that automatic hide, which is right here. Divergence drawing objects there. So that's the width of the bar. And by the way, for each of these properties, if you're not sure what something does, just look down here. I have pretty well written descriptions for each one of these. So if you're not sure, it looks like not every single one of them got updated, but if you're not sure about something, just select it and then check out the description, and you can grab this and drag it up if it's a pretty big description. So for instance, for here, the price component, I have a pretty big description. And that will explain to you what I'm about to now. If you just left click the button, just normal click, that's the same functionality as we had before. It'll remove everything from the price panel. See? And then zooming out does the same thing, which is why you'll see me do that all day long. Zoom out, then mark up the charts, and then zoom back in. Alright, so when zoomed in, everything is showing. Right click to show the properties, and then you can turn on, the major swings are already on, as you can see here. Show markers, set to true. When I turn on the intermediates and the majors, you'll start to see these little fuzzy outlines for some of the intermediates, and that means that it is a potential major. Okay, it's not a confirmed major high yet because price hasn't moved down far enough to confirm it. And you can turn those confirmations on as well. See these little arrows? So those are the major confirmations. This is the intermediate confirmation, and the minors do not have a confirmation. Okay, so it's minor, intermediate, major. A new minor swing in the opposite direction is what confirms the intermediates, and then a new intermediate swing in the opposite direction is what confirms the majors. So this is a pretty elaborate algorithm that took quite a long time to write it out and design it. I'd say that was what took the majority of the time, actually. Well, by far, that's usually the way it is. But anyhow, let me back up here and reload the chart. Alright, I'm going to go bar by bar here, so let me turn the minors on as well. So we have three, you have the different, let's just call these kinds of swings. You have the minor kind, intermediate kind, major kind, and then you have the types, which are whether it's a higher high, lower low, lower high, double top, double bottom. All right, and then you have, I have this written out. I'm trying to remember exactly how we referred to it in the code. But for each kind, there's a confirmed or a potential. Okay? So in real time, right here, that is, and you can probably barely see it, but right there it's a potential intermediate swing high. Okay? It's a potential intermediate swing high, and it won't become a confirmed intermediate swing high until a new minor swing low is found. So when I go forward, it's about to find one, and then it finds one, you see? So that's when we've met the conditions for a new minor swing low, and the intermediate is locked in place. So it was a potential, and then it became confirmed. So right there, it's a minor high with a potential intermediate, and now it's locked in as an intermediate, you see? So it flows from minor to intermediate to major, and it's this process of potential and confirm that makes it as amazing as it truly is. It's pretty incredible how we've designed this. So this is what gives us the backbone for all the pattern recognition stuff that I'm trying to start building out now. Without this, we wouldn't be able to do half of what you're about to see here in the next day or two with these Bloodhound templates. So this is now a potential major. So you see it's in real time, every swing, high or low, is going to be marked with a minor. Okay, you won't see that if you don't have them on, obviously. There's really no need to, have everything turned on, but just so you understand a little bit about how this works, if it is on, you'll see it fluctuate back and forth as the bar is developing. So since we're using the weighted price, and that fluctuates intra-bar, whereas if we were just using the high or the low, once the low is made, it's going to be locked in at that price until a new low is made. So we only had to calculate every time a new high or low for each individual bar was made. Every time a new low was made, we would calculate. Every time a new high was made, we would calculate. But with it set to weighted, typical, open, well, open's not a choice, but weighted, typical, median, or close, those have to be calculated in real time. And of course we had to build out all sorts of optimizations to make it work, but as it adjusts in real time, this bar might be found as the new swing low in real time, but then maybe it starts moving back up, and then the weighted price is then above the previous weighted price. So we didn't have a mechanism to be able to refine the previous bar, to be able to fluctuate between the current and the previous bar, and therefore we couldn't do any of these single price input, median, typical, weighted, close in real time. So in the previous version, if it were set to close or median or typical, it was always one bar late. And the whole purpose behind everything that I'm doing is to be able to do all of this in real time so that we can actually build out proper multi-time frame systems and get the signals in real time, as they're occurring, rather than having to wait for that higher time frame bar to close. So using weighted, and I'm majoring on this right now because this is the major improvement, using weighted or typical or median as opposed to the high and the low is giving us a much more accurate representation of the actual momentum, because that's what the momentum indicator is using, which I touched on earlier. And since that's much more accurate, obviously I wanted to favor that and use that, but to be able to make that happen and be able to do it in real time was that was the mother of all. It was pretty rough trying to figure that out and making it work, which is why it took so long. But we had to do it for Ninja 8, and I wanted to go ahead and do it now, have it done, and then get this pushed over as is into Ninja 8 so that we have, so that we're using the same thing in 7 as we are in 8. So long story short, weighted, median, or typical is much more accurate. Typical more so than median. Weighted, I think, more so than typical. So I think the weighted price gives a truer representation of the bar. I mean, there's 4 data points, and we're using all 4 of them. So I think that's the best that we can do to get, the most accurate representation of a bar with the data that we have. So doing that in real time, being able to fluctuate back and forth, which you'll see in real time if you turn everything on and have the data incoming, was the real trick to all of this. So that was the major improvement. And then through rewriting that swing algorithm to be able to handle that and optimize it, restructure it, make it extensible, and be able to add all the data series for the number of bars in each swing, how fast that swing is moving, and ticks per bar, which is the speed of the swing or the momentum of the swing, or it's the speed of the swing, and then in percentage of the average range per bar. So there's all sorts of pieces of information that we have access to now that we didn't have before. And then through that rewrite and trying to make it work with the divergence algorithm, we had to rewrite the divergence algorithm. And it's way, way, way better now. And in doing that, we needed to update the triggers algorithms. And that has been really beefed up. I'm not going to get into that because it'll take me 20 minutes just to explain what all we did there. But as far as the restructuring of the properties goes, from what you're going to see on the chart, everything will be, pretty much the way that it was, aside from now being able to do weighted in real time. You may see a divergence signal found in real time and then not found, not found, as that bar is moving back and forth above or below the previous bar's extreme weighted price. But other than that, it's pretty much going to look the same, but all the controls have obviously been totally revamped and updated and organized. If you remember before, the properties list was about a mile long and just kind of sloppy and not very well written, not structured very well. I really spent a lot of time on structuring this thing out, so it's, if you want to get in there and set it up, customize it, it's going to be a lot easier for you to do that now and actually understand what's going on. So we have the options and parameters. Again, the swing trend options and parameters are all right here. Okay, everything below for the drawing objects and the markers and what's showing on the price panel, all of that is down here. Swing trend drawing objects, you see. So what controls the sizes of the swings is here. Options and parameters. right here, 1G. And then we do have some presets there. These, I think I need to add another set of presets because these were created for using high-low as the price component input for the swing trend. So these settings seem to be pretty good to be able to find the majority of the divergences without allowing some of the lesser quality kind of minor divergences. But if you set it back to 2, let's see if I set it to 1, that's a little bit too low. If I set it back to 2, that's going to be a little bit too large. So I end up setting this to 6, 0.4, 12, and increase this a little bit. Like so. Okay, so that's the swing trend. This controls all of the divergence setups. And of course you have hidden and regular divergence here. You've got regular divergence parameters here. And you can read the descriptions there. Again, you can drag this up if you need to. For a lot of these, you will need to. And then I'll have some screenshots to go with all this in the guide. I'm not going to get into all the details here, but I have parameters split out from the filters. Okay, so parameters will, most of the parameters are in multiples or multipliers of the average range or number of bars, and then the filters will be, so this kind of controls more about the size or the maximum or minimum allowances for the divergences found, the parameters, and then the filters control which ones are allowed to show. Which of the ones that have been found according to the parameters are then allowed to be filtered through, allowed to pass and then show. And that has to do with the types of swings using the swing trend algorithm, and that's where we really fine-tune the look and the size of these divergence signals found. And then the double divergences and the triple divergences, you can read that. I'm not going to go into all of the details there. I'll get sidetracked. And then you have the same exact layout for the hidden divergences, parameters and filters. Now I've added the ability here, and this is something we'll do in Ninja 8 with the volume as well, but to be able to filter into a separate data series those divergences which qualify as extreme. And all I have in here right now, I mean, we had to stop somewhere, otherwise I would have spent the next month on this doing all the things that I have in my head, but I have it set up to where we can filter into a separate data series, not visually, but into a separate data series internally for Bloodhound and Blackbird for the automated templates. Excuse me, those signals that qualify as extreme. All I have right now, again, are the thresholds. That's the scale of the actual divergence component here for the start bar for regular divergence here. So that means, let me show you an example. To allow any divergence to pass, to show it all, the start bar, see, this is the start bar where the trend line starts. That has to pass. I'm going into more detail than I wanted to now, but let me just carry on. So for a bullish regular divergence, the start bar has to be below 50. And you can elect to plot those lines. And you'll see that when you make a change to these expandable class properties here, these drop-down properties, when you make a change and click apply, they collapse again. So if you're trying to modify and work with different sets of properties in here, it's easier to just collapse everything else and just have the one open that you're working with. And then you don't have to, go back and try to figure out where it was and all of that. So I just enabled to show the threshold requirement for the regular divergences. So that means that a bullish regular divergence must be below -50, the start bar of it, okay? So for all of those that are actually below -70, those will get sent to another data series that I can access inside of Bloodhound, so that I can single out those divergences that are actually much more significant, such as this one right here, because it's actually below 70. It's almost below 80. So that will get filtered into a separate data series that I can then access in Bloodhound. And see, I could set that to 100 and filter out everything else in that data series, but not visually. So I can still show it visually, which is why I added this, so that I could still show all of them visually, but then filter them a bit more precisely without having to use a bunch of different solvers inside of Bloodhound, you see. So I could set that to 110, 120, and just find these really extreme divergences here, like this. So I'll add a few more parameters into that extreme filter in Ninja 8, so that we can really, require that. For instance, here we've got a massive, massive divergence. Yeah, it's over 100 points in this normalized momentum, which is pretty significant. That's usually just the width of the distance between the overbought and oversold. So I'll add that, and then I'll add the maximum deviation between the start bar and the end bar. All right, any questions on any of that part? Just turning into a full training session, but I'm sure it's needed. The pullback object, no, we never had a pullback object for the divergence. That's for the volume. Yeah, we didn't have that before for the divergence. That's all kind of built in to the swings. So what controls that is the sizes of the swings. So for instance, the filters here, regular divergence filters, this is a new one. Minimum swing size. So for instance, before we just had start bar swing size and end bar swing size. You'll notice that divergences, the start bar and the end bar, will only be drawn to and from swing markers. Okay? So that's another reason why I'm going to be adding the swing trend to the volume analyst to refine the divergences a bit further. We're going to combine different aspects from what we already have in the volume with what we have with the swing trend, because there are some things with the volume that we don't have here that I want to have, and then vice versa. So we can elect to set or filter the type of swing for the start bar and the type of swing for the end bar. But what I couldn't do before was set a minimum swing size requirement between the two. So for instance, I may elect to use only major swings for the end bar, but then allow any for the start bar, and that gives me no control over the size of the retracement down here, the pullback, right? Which we do have in the volume divergence. So I never had that before in Divergences Pro. So with this, and I tried to think of the best, most efficient way to do this. Should we just add exactly what we have in the volume, or is there an easier way to do it? Just pulling from the list of swings that we're already creating. I mean, we already have a list of all of this, all these different swing types, and the bar index ID and all kinds of stuff. So rather than adding something new, I just used it like so, where we can set the minimum swing size between the start bar and including the start bar and the end bar, but not including the end bar. So for instance, I know that's a mouthful, but if this is set to major, and let me show you, let me see if I can just find an exact example. With that minimum swing size, we've got, just looking at this one, we've got the end bar and the start bar, right? Right here, the start bar, that's an intermediate swing high, but you see that fuzzy bit around it? That's a potential major swing high. And it wasn't confirmed as a major because we don't have the major confirmation. We don't have a new intermediate swing low between or immediately following that potential major high. So if we got a bit further move down according to these settings, intermediate deviation and intermediate look back, and we found a new intermediate low, that would be confirmed as a major high. Okay, but it wasn't because the pullback wasn't strong enough. It didn't go down far enough. So therefore it remained as an intermediate swing high, you see? Okay, so that potential, just by the way, that potential divergence drawing objects, that fuzzy bit around it, the opacity is controlled right here. So that's 40% opacity. If I set it to 100, it would show as a typical, confirmed major high, but I'm showing it a little less than half opacity so that you know it is a potential major because it has moved up far enough and above enough bars back that it meets all of the major swing requirements. It just wasn't confirmed because it didn't move down far enough afterwards. Okay, that's how the swing algorithm works. You have to, you find the potential, and then once it's confirmed, then you lock it in. So now then, setting the minimum swing size, which is right here. Can't believe I'm trying to do this on an hour and 45 minutes of sleep. Probably not my best idea. Alright, so minimum swing size I have set right now to any. This is the new one. This is what gives me full control over that pullback. Constantine. William, no, weighted is not volume weighted. We don't have that option. You only have 4 data points on the bar. Close, median, high, low. Well, there's, yeah, open, high, low, close, median, typical, and weighted. So there are 7. And weighted is the one that uses the most data points on the bar. I'm sorry, so yeah, the data points on the bar, you have 4. Open, high, low, close. And then from those 4, we get the weighted. And then from the high, low, plus close, we get the typical. And then from the high and the low, we get the median. So this is the one with the most data points. All right, so this minimum swing size I have set right now to any, and that includes the start bar, okay, but does not include the end bar. And the end bar actually is for potential swings, you see? So that's the minimum potential swing size of each divergence setup end bar. So that is a potential major, so it's allowed. Okay. Now then, if I set this minimum swing size to intermediate or major, this one will still be allowed. See? But if I set it to major only, then it will be removed because the pullback between the two was not large enough, you see? So it doesn't give me exactly precise control over the exact pullback to be able to set it to a value, something other than the major requirements or the intermediate requirements. But using the data available without adding any other calculations, it does give me some control and enough control. It's plenty of control for what I'm trying to do. Okay, so that controls the pullback. We have much more control over those divergence signals, and we can allow ones that would previously be filtered out because I was trying to eliminate some of the smaller ones, where using that previous rule would filter out some really great ones that occurred at rounded tops or rounded bottoms. So I needed to find a way to add some control but still be able to allow some of those kind of a bit more rare divergent signals for those rounded tops and bottoms. But at any rate, let me just go a bit further here. The stops and targets, the divergence stops and targets, are completely flawless now, which was a total nightmare to get worked out. This was just a mess to get totally situated and finalized. Something with the way that this has to be calculated is a bit tricky for the drawing, and then the rules I had for the drawing, it just made for a bit of a disaster. But let me show you what I'm talking about. May as well keep going now that I'm into a full training session here.
Keep going, Dan.
Keep going. Regular target. Yeah. Regular divergence stop loss. We have the extender now built into the Divergences Pro as well. And it works with all 3 of these source values policies. I'm not going to try to get into that now. That's going to be totally mind-numbing. Plot it on the same panel. Add one more. Can't believe what we have. Pretty unreal. So this was something that Pep had requested a long time ago, was to be able to set stops and targets based on the size of the swing that leads into the divergence, and then be able to trigger that according to a percentage break of that swing, which is one of the triggers. The percentage, what do I call it? The percent required trigger or something like that. So this is all based on the distance. So for this triple divergence here, the width of that swing into it is what we're using for setting the stop and the target. All right, so I'm going to add these. But in order for it to show, I have to actually turn those on. Which is down here. So you can control the drawing objects from the pop-out properties grid there, but you cannot turn them on from there. So I have them turned off so that it's not running a bunch of calculations that are totally unnecessary, that you're not using. So if you ever want to turn them on, I mean, I have a couple of workspaces that I have some of this stuff built out in just for divergence by itself, with some examples, which I'll be sending out with the divergence installer later, probably tomorrow, and you guys will have those workspaces as well. But that'll serve as a kind of a starting point if you want to get into this sort of a thing. But you have to turn them on just to enable the calculations, which then will set the data series which the readers access. Okay. So when they're enabled, and then you add the readers to the chart, you'll see what we're actually getting here for the prices for the stop loss and the target. Smaller includes larger. Okay, and then you can turn on the drawing objects. Show the lines, true, and then show the historical, true. And there are your percentages for the stop, below the setup, below the bullish setup, or the profit target 1, profit target 2. Okay, anytime you're using the readers, you also have to have the reader manager open. So there's the reader manager. I think I see an issue. No, I just need to turn them on. Okay, so I didn't have the double and triple turned on, and if I do turn those on, see how we don't have the stops and targets for the double and the triple? So you can access all three of them from the one data series that I have set here in the reader. That's this regular div stop loss, or you can set them individually using the double stop and target, the triple stop and target. This one here will use, it will set the prices of all three, the single, double, triple, but only if you have this, which is the default setting, set to include the double and triple, and with the single. I know that's complicated. You'll have to read my write-up on that for it to really make sense, but let me just turn these on I'll try to get through this. Now you see? So now I'm getting the double and the triple from just that one data series. Because of that property I just showed you. So anyhow, they're all set properly now. We get the exact right prices. Before we had some issues with resetting and the automated orders suddenly going to 0 because we had a null for one of the bars in the data series. Anyhow, all that's fixed. It was a nightmare, but we got it. So you can actually do real back testing, real automated systems just with only divergence all by itself, which is pretty cool. All right, so that's the stops and targets, and then the alerts system has been updated for all of the NT7 tools. They all use the same system now. Toolbar alert system is a little bit fancier because of the alarm clock feature type deal, where you can have that pop-up message pop up and not exit for, you know, X number of seconds, or until you click it, if you need it to wake you up out of bed to have a look or whatever. So that's a little bit more elaborate for the toolbar, but for the divergence and the volume, we now have the screenshot functionality to take automatic screenshots and subdivide them into different folders, just like we have in the toolbar. It'll auto-create these folders according to instrument, bar type, workspace, whatever. And one of the problems that you would have is, you know, you'd have the screenshots set up, and then the alert would go off on another workspace that was hidden, and then your screenshots would show, you know, whatever you had on the screen instead of that actual chart that was minimized or on another workspace. So now it will pop up a message and then actually ask you if you want to switch to that workspace before it takes the screenshot. And if you click the button yes, then it will switch, take the screenshot, flash the chart, whatever. You have to enable it though. And then if you're not at your keyboard, I have this set to false by default, just in case, you know, it messes somebody up and they want to try to hold me accountable. So I have that set to false by default. If you set it to true and you're not at your desk and that pop-up message comes up, if it counts down to 5 and you haven't clicked it, then it will automatically flip and then take the screenshot. And then of course you can email it to whomever, wherever. And then the alerts are all nice and neat in these expandable properties. It's one heck of an update. Hope you guys enjoy it. And then Ninja 8 will be just like this. And then we have the swing trend alerts that I've beefed up a little bit. Major, higher, high. Only for the majors here. So we didn't have any of this before. I think we had the trend change, but I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that we did. But I added all this in for the majors. I didn't add the intermediates because you can just use a different chart to get the same effect, and we had to stop somewhere. That's already a couple thousand properties. So, all right, I'm going to end it there. It was a